Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the May 23rd special meeting of Nanaimo City Council. I'd first like to recognize that we are on the traditional territory of the Sinixic First Nation. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Sheila Gurry, we have a very short formal agenda. The first is the introduction of late items. We have none, Ms. Gurry, I gather. Motion for the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Seconded. Councillor Bonner, all those in favor? Motion carried. I'm going to give a very brief mayor's report tonight. I just want to mention a couple of things that are good news for the city. Firstly, it's Public Art Week, May 19th to 25th, and a number of artworks have been installed around the community, and I hope that all the citizens will take advantage of viewing the public art created to enhance our community, attract visitors, and impress the local public. Additionally, it's the popular tree voucher program has returned. Starting Wednesday, May 29th, $25 vouchers for trees will be available for purchase in the Services and Resources Building located at 411 Dunsmuir, and the vouchers can then be redeemed at Green Thumb for a designated tree worth up to $90 in value. I think we're all conscious of the fact that in a world beset by climate change, the concept of planting a tree is healthy, it's good for the soul, and it's good for the community.
It's hard work.
The chair of the regional district, who had to plant one tree earlier today, has reminded me it's hard work, and he's quite right, and physical exercise is also good for all of us. We've also seen the Nanaimo street banners installed. This year's design is by Amy Pye of Pye Design. It's one of the things that makes our community unique and again enhances the beauty of our local community. And finally, to accelerate your business in Nanaimo, is the event taking place at Bevan Park Social Centre from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. on May the 30th, and the Chamber of Commerce and the city working hard to promote business in our community. I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Gurry in just a second, but I just want to say this is a wonderful event for all of us as council members. This is an opportunity tonight joining us for our town hall meeting to raise questions and issues that are important to you. All I ask are the common rules of courtesy that we expect at every council meeting, except this time I'm asking you to keep your questions really, really brief so that we can get to as many questions and give as many answers as is reasonably possible tonight in our 2-hour time frame. So without further ado, join us online at Twitter, Nanaimo TH, or Facebook, cn.ca/FB Town Hall, or cn.ca/Web Town Hall. And I'm sure someone else will repeat that with more accuracy as the younger members of council laugh at the mayor who's a dinosaur. Over to you, Ms. Gurry. Thank you.
I think the word you're looking for, Your Worship, is hashtag.
Hashtag. There's a reason I don't go on social media.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship and Council. I'm going to turn it right over to Mr. Reid Botwright momentarily. I just wanted to basically say that this e-town hall this evening is for residents to have the opportunity to participate and engage with their council after their first 6 months in office, and to check in using a variety of methods that aren't regularly available at a regular council meeting. So as you've already pointed out, Your Worship, they can communicate and ask questions via Twitter, Facebook, and our City of Nanaimo website. And Mr. Botwright will let you know how it's going to work this evening, and I'll turn it over to him.
All right. Thank you, Sheila, for that. As she mentioned, my name is Reid Botwright, and I will be your MC, your host tonight. I'd like to thank everyone who've come down and are able to make it out in person, and all of the people who are at home on social media and checking in on the live stream and checking in on the website. We have a few ground rules if you haven't attended one of these or watched one of these before. As our worship mentioned, we do have a 2-hour time frame, but we've already had quite a few submissions, so we're going to try to get through as many of the questions as we can in that period. But if you could be brief with your questions, as well for the councillors, there is going to be a 5-minute limit per question, so we can get through as many. And any of the ones that we aren't able to address tonight, they'll be circulated around to councillors and staff, and we'll do our best to get answers for all of those and publish those out on the website within the coming weeks. So if you are here in person, you can come up to the podium or line up in a line here. If you have accessibility concerns, just put up your hand. I can also come out to you with a microphone to help you ask the questions. And we'll be going on a first come, first served basis for those. The chair will then handle all of the questions as they come in and delegate it in the typical question period format to the councillors as they see fit to answer it. And then if we need to go to staff, we'll go to staff. So our topic today, and we're going to try to stay as much as we can on that topic, is the draft 2019 to 2022 strategic plan. So again, try to keep your questions on topic, as we won't be addressing other topics tonight. That'll be for other e-town halls. So, and have fun. This is an opportunity you guys have to talk to your councillors, to get answers that you may not have found in other media, and we like answering these questions. So without further ado, I will take the first question from our studio audience, if anyone would like to ask a question. To put you guys on the spot. Oh, yep. Okay. If you'd like to step up to the podium there. Thank you.
I was going to say good evening and welcome. You're the first person with courage. Well done.
I was just wondering if you could give us an update on Nanaimo, the Harbourfront Walkway. There was an article in the news bulletin a couple of months ago that sounds like you guys were maybe shelving it or putting it on the back burner. I was just wondering if that was true or not.
Indeed, we're doing the opposite. We are spending, I believe it's $400,000 to look at a study to examine what will be the best connection between Departure Bay itself and the ferry terminal, essentially. There was high public interest in an elevated walkway, which I think Council agreed looked very expensive, not that attractive, with all sorts of environmental concerns. So we're looking at getting back better information to ensure that we can complete the walkway in a way that's both environmentally sensitive and meets financial expectations of ratepayers. So that's good news. No, we're not shelving the walkway. We realize it is an enormously popular thing for the people of Nanaimo, very desirable and a very useful adjunct to increase tourism in the community.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And for people here in the auditorium, there are some resources about our topic at hand at the front. I've been noticing some people trickle up and pick them up. If you want those resources, it'll give you some background, maybe some impetus for some questions of your own that you didn't think of right away. So for our first...
And Councillor Thorpe has something to add.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just before we move on, I appreciated that first question because I think there has been misinformation, and I think His Worship summed things up very nicely. But the other thing I wanted to add is that people will need to recognize that this is a very long-term project. And yes, we are still proceeding with it. We're looking at what sections can be done easily and cost-effectively, but it's not going to all get done at once, and it will take a long time to completely finish. But I personally think it's a valuable asset to our downtown and our tourism. So I look forward to having sections of it proceed. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. So for our first electronic question, we go to our website, and this is a question for Mayor and Council. Nanaimo has several names for the same group of people. They are known as the City Council, the Committee of the Whole, the Finance and Audit Committee, and the Governance and Priorities Committee. All of the same membership, i.e. the elected council of Nanaimo. How do these distinctions affect Nanaimo governance?
Councillor Gesselbrock wants to answer that one.
That's an excellent question. Thank you for the submission. So The way that council's organized, there's the regular council meetings that are televised, and there's certain procedures that go along with that. It's quite a formal meeting. And then we also have different committees that allow for different types of business to be dealt with and have slightly different procedures. And so folks are familiar with the Committee of the Whole, and that's where the community has an opportunity to be delegations and speak. And so that's the Committee of the Whole is something that we're also have adjusted, and we've created a new committee called the Governance and Priorities Committee. And that committee allows council to do a bit more of a deeper dive into topics and have a deeper discussion around a boardroom table, and that's held up at the SARC building. And we bring people in to talk on specific topics, and council sets the agenda as needed. So we've been doing a lot of work, a lot of briefings in those meetings so far on the environment and different aspects of city business. And so that's another committee. So recommendations from that committee then get sent to the regular council meeting, which is televised around this table to be motions to be actioned on. And then the Finance and Audit Committee is another committee of council, which all council members sit on. And basically that committee deals primarily with financial matters of the city. And again, recommendations that are made there are then brought towards the regular council meeting, which is around the table. And so all the different names really allow for different types of focuses that council can have, but it is the same group of people, but with a bit different of a focus. So that would be the simplified answer, I would say, and I'd love to hear from other council members for a bit more detailed.
Thank you, Councillor Martman.
Thank you for the question, and you summed it up quite well, Councillor Gasselbrat. I think in a simplest of terms, the regular council meeting is the most formal with procedure, and it's through the Government Priorities Committee or the previous Committee of the Whole that allows us for more open dialogue and more conversation on the various topics that are brought to us or the delegations that get to appear. So one is a very formal structure, and the other one allows us for more engagement with the community delegations and conversation amongst ourselves. Thank you.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. Just a tiny distinction that was important for me in my learning in this new role, and that's that it's council. It's the formal council meetings where decisions are made. So at the Finance and Audit Committee, we debate finance and audit topics. At the GPC, we do the same. We debate what's in front of us, and as Councillor Gasselbrock said, that changes all the time. But those committees recommend certain things to council, and then the decisions are made here. So that was a distinction.
Thank you very much. Reid.
Thank you for those. So we're going to take one more from the internet, and this one comes in from the website again. Just a reminder to everyone, you can go to cnan.ca/webtownhall to see the form to submit your own questions from at home, or even in the studio audience if you'd like. So this one is a general question. Where on the city's website is the feedback received from the public on the draft strategic plan? How was this feedback taken into account in the final draft plan?
I'm going to defer to Councillor Hemmons on this because if it requires any comment on anything technical, it won't be the mayor who will respond. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. I'm actually not sure where on the website it exists. I'm sure staff could tell us if it does or if it doesn't. But going back to the committees, the GPC that we had a couple, I believe last week actually, was where we heard the feedback from residents and used that to inform the next draft of the strategic plan. So we've actually had 2 different drafts of the strategic plan. We had the first one, and then we had community comments incorporated and just discussion about community comments and what we wanted to incorporate, et cetera. And now we're on the second draft.
And I'm going to ask some member of staff who can point to the website simply because, notwithstanding my humor around the issue, I think it's important. It's a legitimate question. The public needs to have the correct answer. Arceo, Mr. Rudolph, please.
The formal on the website consultation process ended at the end of March as a part of the draft. So we received, I think, 20 some odd submissions at that time. So there was a specific period. And so since that time, as you've noted, we've been working with council on a series of drafts. So I can see if there could be some ultimate confusion around this. But what was on the agenda for this past week's GPC, this previous Tuesday, is the current working draft. And there will be a final draft presented to council at its GPC committee meeting to be held on June 10th, I think it is. So in the interim between now and then, our forum for, we're open to suggestion on this, but it would be emails, consultation with the various members of council, either electronically or in person, and a less structured version unless council so directs.
Thank you, Mr. Rudolph. Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to add to what Mr. Rudolph said, that we did receive some feedback as to where the public input was placed on the website, and we now have connected it to the strategic plan. So it is available for anybody that wants to see what public input we've received during that time period that Mr. Rudolph is speaking of. It is now linked to that page, and it's right there for everybody to check in and see.
Very good, thank you. Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you. Just to clarify, I detect a subtext to that question, and that is whether council considered feedback in the next draft, and I want to assure the public that we did.
And Your Worship, all I'll add to that is that it was received at the Governance and Priorities Committee, so council received via email as well as at the meeting all of the feedback that was received. There was some of the input that was incorporated into the changes of the drafts, and it was there for council to use or incorporate it as necessary. I believe some of the action items or some of the broadness of the plan that you originally had has been worked on and narrowed down into more action items being presented on that plan. So I think that was part of one of the main feedback that we heard from the public. But other than that, I can't speak to what council used from that feedback.
Thanks, Ms. Gurry. Councillor Thorpe?
Well,
You're going to have to...
Thank you. I think Councillor Hemmens and Ms. Gurry actually summed up what I was going to say. And just to assure the public that, yes, we did take into account the feedback that council received. Not to say that every individual comment is going to appear in the final draft of the strategic plan. But if there were themes that we saw identified, we certainly took those into account. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Worship. And I think this actually touches on another question, and that it's in the queue, and they're related in the sense that a strategic plan is typically actions and how you're going to achieve them. Some of the feedback I personally heard and some of the feedback represented in those comments did sort of hint at that. And the direction of council and working with staff was to sort of give some more focus to that, provide some direction and provide some actions. And at the May 21st GPC, that was sort of furthered, and timelines were directed to be attached to the things that could have timelines, and that's how we start to show progress and measure our actions over time against the plan.
Thanks very much. Reid.
All right, thank you very much for that. I think some are chomping at the bit out here in the audience to get their questions asked. So if you would like to come up and pose your question. Thank you.
Not exactly chomping at the bit. I have a few. A little cluster of questions, if you don't mind. And I want to start off by saying I think this is probably one of the most complete strategic plans that I've seen a new council put forward since I've been in Nanaimo, and that's been a fairly long time. So job well done on a lot of things. My concern is that while you've identified certain priorities that you feel need to come to the fore, I would like to ask, how do you expect to have those priorities elevated in any way that's different than the stuff that you haven't prioritized? There's lots of business in this of the city that needs consideration. These are the ones that you want to tackle the most or the first. So.
Councillor Hemmens and then Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Someone told me when I began this job that the true mark of a council's objectives and values is the budget. And so we entered the budget process with about 4 weeks of experience under our belt this term, and that was quite eye-opening. And so I would expect that next budget round, which will start, I think departments start doing it in June, that will be a more accurate reflection of the values that we have put forth in this strategic plan. So budgetary,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Next time.
Councillor Brown.
I think Councillor Hammond's answered it almost identical how it answered. I would also sort of suggest that, ultimately we provide direction to staff and they will deliver that, and they come back to us with major policy items or obviously budgetary requests. So there's in a large element, we're relying on staff to sort of follow through with these priorities and orient themselves towards them, but then come back to us with the hard decisions for us to make around budget and really, say if you want to achieve this, this is X, Y, and Z is required, and it requires these resources.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. And just to let everyone know, this strategic plan is a living document, and we're going to be reviewing it regularly, at least once a year. Some of the action items that we have completed will be taken off. We'll be adding new ones on. We'll see if where we're at that time is where we want to be in another 4 years. So we'll be looking at the plan on a regular basis throughout our term.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I may, just one more piece to add on to that, Mr. Appel. As you know, the strategic plan starts out in a very general sense, and it lists our priorities, and then we examine some focus areas, and then from those break down into actual action plans. But then the follow-up to that, as I think Councillor Bonner is suggesting, is that staff goes away and does their work, and we will be getting annually from staff reports on how they are progressing towards completion of those action plans. Bearing in mind that some are shorter term than others, some are longer term action plans, but we will be getting regular updates on how we are doing in advancing towards achieving those goals and making those plans happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if I may, I just want to add one thing, that Council has been very clear with staff and the city employees generally that we are not a council who is in any way adverse to innovative ideas and comments from staff. We believe that the people who work for the city have a lot to offer, and they have been encouraged quite specifically and directly in open council to offer up their ideas. Pet projects maybe they've been waiting to persuade a council to consider for many, many years. The people who work for the city bring talent and experience to their jobs, and we want to ensure that they can have full opportunity, just as we encourage all the citizens of Nanaimo, which is what we're doing here tonight, to participate in their civic government, both directly and indirectly. And that includes offering up the best thoughts you have. We've all had a few wacky ideas that turned out to be quite useful from time to time in our lives, and we're certainly hopeful that no one will be discouraged from participating. So without further ado, back to you, Reid.
All right, thank you for that. That was a good question. We got one here electronically, ironically enough, right along the same vein. So I was hoping maybe we could elaborate on at least a part of it, the discussion you guys just have. So this is for Mayor and Council from our website. It says, the definition of a plan is a detailed proposal for doing or achieving something. The strategic plan does not provide any details on what will be achieved or how. I think you guys covered some of that already. The comment here is it seems more like a mission statement. How will you know specifically you've achieved success?
Councillor Martman.
Thank you. I think that question may have come about when we were doing our first draft of our strategic plan, which was broader in a sense. We've now narrowed it down, as people have talked about, at our Governance and Priority Committee, where we do have what our priorities were with the 4 sections, narrow down into the key focus areas, and then from there, we have created action plans. One thing that Councillor Brown mentioned, we did ask for timelines. We want to know what we can accomplish in the first year, what may take 4 years or may take longer, but you will be able to review the 2019 to 22 strategic plan does now have action items under each category.
Thank you, Councillor Martman.
Right on to the next one. All right, so this one is coming in from our website and is to Mayor and Council. The citizen has just received their property tax notice for 2019, and their taxes after the senior grant, which has gone up, have increased by 17.2%. As a senior on a fixed income, they believe this is unacceptable. What justification do you have for this?
I'm going to offer not a justification, but an explanation. Properties are all assessed independently by the BC Assessment Authority, every piece of property within the boundaries of the City of Nanaimo. We levy an increase, generally as council this year, of 5%, based on last year's necessary expenditures for the City of Nanaimo. Not every property remains at the same value. Some properties go up, some go down, as a matter of fact. What it means in this particular individual's case is not that his taxes per se are being raised any differently than anyone else's. It is simply that the value of his or her property has risen quite dramatically in comparison to the overall increases within the community. I'll give you some key points. Overall residential assessment values in Nanaimo increased an average of 12.83%, and with a 10.53% of that related to market changes and 2.3% related to new construction. The average home value increased to $516,418 from $467,220. So what that means is by the applicable tax rate for every $1,000 of property's assessed value, the residential rate for taxes this year is $6.90. Last year, it was $7.28. So on one level, you could say taxes are going down. We're only charging $6.90 every $1,000 of value instead of $7.28. And so what it means simply in this person's case is that the value of their property increased substantially. I won't tell you which former councillor, has a pretty good sense of humor, sent me an email asking if I had any spare change, because his property taxes, his total bill after seniors grant and homeowner grant, have increased $3.97 this year. I commiserated with him in response, pointing out that that meant his property hadn't gone up in value whatsoever. So unlike some people in the community owning their residences, they have seen a non-taxable gain in their assets, with the only price being paid for that is the fact that in relation to other properties, their property taxes will be higher, but they're not being taxed any differently than their neighbors. Long explanation, I know. I hope it was relatively clear. If Ms. Fuller wishes to add anything over there, she was smiling. I'm happy to hear her say something. Thank you. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. With regard to the increase in taxes this year, there's a couple points I'd like to make. Number one, for those who might be in a bit of a financial bind because of it, there is the opportunity for deferral of taxes, and I believe you would see the Finance Department or this in the SARC building, or
There is a link on the city website.
on the city website. Okay. The other thing that I think we need to remind everybody is that, well, it was a 5% increase overall. That was included a couple of things that were beyond the city's control, like the employment health tax and our increase in WorkSafe BC premiums that went up substantially, and we have absolutely no control over that. The other thing we needed to start looking at improving our reserve amounts, because at some point in time, different infrastructure is going to need to be replaced, and we don't know what the interest rates are going to be from here forward, and if we have to go out and borrow money to it at 10 or 12%, I think this is probably a more prudent way of having the money to improve those infrastructures. And of course, the other one is always a tug of war. We're always getting people, well, we want this and we want that, which are all valid points. I'm not diminishing any of them. but they all come at a cost. And so we have to balance at what we're prepared to do year after year, what we figure we can do spread over a number of years to try to keep the tax increase realistic. And the final point I'd make is that I always have a little bit of trouble with percentages because we don't know what the actual figure is. Percentages, 17.2% on $1,000 is a lot less than it is on $10,000. So, you know, it's all relative. So, but I'm sure in this case it is probably a hardship. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. And first of all, for anybody like the person who submitted the question, whose tax went up substantially, of course they have my sympathy, but I think the Mayor's explanation hopefully covered off on that. It's more the assessed value of the property that determines whether the taxes go up or in fact possibly down. And in many cases in the city, the tax increase or the value of the assessment resulted in a very minor tax increase. I think to Councillor Turley's point, it's important to note that while nobody likes to pay taxes, and I just paid mine this afternoon, we have to remember that those taxes are collected so that the city can provide necessary, basic, valuable services to our citizens. So everybody wants their garbage collected, everybody wants connections that'll work for sewer and water, they want their parks and trails maintained, they want the boulevards weeded, they want the streets swept and so on. All of those services are important and they all cost money. The last, and Ms. Fulla can maybe help me on this if she wishes to, but the last couple of years the city actually decided to impose tax increases that were below the cost of inflation. And in fact, last year we even dipped into our reserve funds to artificially lower the tax increase, which in my opinion was short-sighted. So we've had some making up to do. I think keeping it to 5% for city services this year was actually quite modest. So as Councillor Turley said, it's a double-edged sword. People want the services. We have to pay for them. Every year brings inflation. So hopefully the best we can do is determine how most efficiently to spend those dollars to give the services that our citizens want. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I'd like to remind everyone at home again, if you'd like to submit any of your questions online on Twitter, you can use the hashtag NanaimoTH. Or on Facebook, you can go to cnan.ca/FB Town Hall. Or on our website, you can go to cnan.ca/Web Town Hall. We're still taking them in and putting them in the queue, and hopefully we get to all of them tonight. So if there's anyone in the audience who would like to ask a question, I see someone right here. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. My question with the strategic plan, the Opal Road closure, the partial road closure, there was no notification to the local residents in the area about this occurring. Where was anybody going to be actually contacted, notified that there was going to be construction on the street? From what I've gathered is it's a matter of taking the traffic down from 1,400 cars a day to 700 cars a day. I use that road every day. My wife uses it multiple times a day. You count those road counters that are there, we're counting each trip at least 2 cars. So these 700 cars that are going over the road back and forth are actually counting as 1,400. My question is, who was contacted about this at all? Where was this discussion?
Before I ask Mr. Sims to provide a specific answer around who was contacted, the item was on the agenda for City Council, which is a publicly available agenda. Council looked at the staff report, considered the safety issues, and it was a majority decision of Council, and Council takes responsibility for its decisions, to close, to reconfigure part of Opal Road simply because of the volume of traffic and the safety issues that arise from that. It was never designed to be what amounts to almost an arterial road, which is what it had become in terms of the volume of traffic.
So sorry.
Sorry. I was going to say, I'll let Mr. Sims.
Your Worship, you've covered it. I think Opal Road was a local, very narrow road that's only intended to serve the residents that live there. And the comments about the number of vehicles is an indication that it's actually it's not working at the way it was intended. So the construction will occur, and we'll monitor the conditions of the other major intersections at Departure Bay, just as we would with any traffic calming.
Before I let you ask the next question, I will say that, you know, Council is very conscious of the concerns that have been raised by citizens living in the area, and we'll certainly, we're not adverse to changing our minds based on evidence that will be determined over time. So please ask your...
I have a petition that I've been going around collecting people who did not know that this was going to occur. Are you going to listen to any of them? We're talking 28 houses on one road, blocking almost an entire community on Rock City, and according to your strategic plan, you're looking at an environmentally friendly plan. You're talking about going from a 0.4 kilometer drive to 1.8 kilometers. How is that environmentally friendly?
I can only say to you, when your petition is ready, please feel free to bring it to City Hall.
Will do.
And appreciate the views. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you for that. All right, so this next question comes in electronically from our website. It's a general question. As you may know, there is a new residential community being built at the end of Strickland Street in South Nanaimo. At this time, I've been told there are no plans to divert traffic from proceeding up Strickland Lane, a one-car width laneway, or install speed deterrents like speed bumps, or establishing sidewalks along Harborview Street. What does the city plan to do with respect to managing the increased flow of traffic along this laneway and improving the livability and walkability of Strickland Street? Kind of related to the last one.
I would regard that as a seriously operational question, but Councillor Hemmons has courageously stepped forward to answer.
Not to answer, to simply say that this isn't something that Council's been briefed on, so I would ask staff to share with us.
Your Worship, that is a fairly technical question that we'd welcome that at a staff level. If the questioner would like to contact our development services group, they could fulfill some of the details. But I can advise that the one lane of road of Strickland will be configured at each end to discourage shortcutting, and that the sidewalks will be installed along Short and around the corner onto Harborview to help funnel the traffic that way and also keep pedestrians safe.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just need to comment, I think, with all due respect, that both, I believe, of the last two questions are really operational topics, which our staff are in charge of and do an excellent job. The purpose of this evening, as I see it, is to deal with our strategic plan, which is a more general overview of council priorities and possible focus areas and action plans dealing with those. So I hope we don't get into the weeds too much with operational issues or specific situations which council might not have all the facts on yet from staff, but we will get briefed and make our decisions accordingly. Thank you.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. I just want to say to those in the gallery as well as those watching at home that you can call City Hall anytime and speak to a planner, speak to an engineer. You can ask these questions at any point. You don't need to wait for an e-town hall. We have amazing staff and they are available to you. So great questions, definitely more appropriate for staff, and they're completely available to you.
No, I'm done.
Okay. Reid.
All right. Thanks for that. We'll do one more electronic one here. This one comes in again from our website, and it's a general question. Given that you have declared a climate emergency, how do you plan to create a complete and linked cycling network throughout Nanaimo. On busy streets, such as Hammond Bay, Deep Bay, Departure Bay, for example, will you ensure cyclist safety by installing a barrier? Will you install a divide to stop cars from parking in the bike lane on streets such as Boundary Avenue? Thank you.
I'm going to respond in a general way first and then turn to some of the members of council who actually ride bicycles fairly regularly. The improvements that we make around city streets, sidewalks, sewer connections for that matter, bicycle lanes often relate to developments. So when you propose a subdivision of a piece of existing property, the city's going to require you to pay for and install such things as sidewalks and bike lanes, dependent on the area, the nature of the site, etc. And so that's one way of the city, in a sense, getting the developer and the potential purchasers of those properties to pay for those improvements, rather than increasing general taxation across the city to everyone in order to pay for those kinds of improvements. Because, frankly, I think it's fair to say, and I see Mr. Lindsay coming down, that if we, in fact, put bike lanes everywhere everyone wanted them today, we'd be talking a lot more than 5%, let alone the chaos caused by construction, as we're already getting complaints about the level of construction on roads in the city so far this year, which is all necessary and important works. So, having commented in a general way, I'm going to turn to Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. As some people may know, I'm quite passionate about this topic, and it's an extremely challenging topic, especially when you're doing retrofits. As Your Worship, you correctly identified, I think that it is a very expensive proposition and made very difficult when you're trying to implement these within an existing city that might not necessarily have what we would hold to be our standard of infrastructure today, especially with pedestrians and cyclists. But I will say, we are currently in the process, and by we, I really, our staff are updating their engineering standards to incorporate more complete streets. So what that looks like is really making sure that there's equitable space for all transportation users, whether they're pedestrians, cyclists, or automobile users. So going forward, through development-driven projects or through city-driven projects, we will have an engineering standard that we will try to meet in every circumstance where space allows that accommodates all users. Currently, we have the downtown mobility study, again looking at how we can improve our road networks in the downtown to better accommodate all people and move people and goods in and out of downtown. And then finally, Mr. Sims, you might be able to provide the exact dates, but we do have the Transportation Master Plan, which has existed for some time, which provides guidance, but a further sort of supplementary project, I believe in 2020, is the active transportation strategy to sort of so make that a more robust focus and how that can actually be delivered out on the landscape over time. That's going to look at things and completing some of these patchworks, looking at a minimum grid strategy to sort of say, how do we get you from point A from point B effectively and safely? And then some real, those are really planning related to provide guidance, but we do have some things on the go. And again, I would defer to Mr. Sims or other council if I miss some, but we do have the Labio Complete Streets project, which will, over the next coming years, you'll start to see basically a retro, is it Labio? Am I getting the road correct? Metro. That will see the complete street build out over half of that. And we do have the Wakesaya corridor that is proceeding, and again, these are multi-year projects, but within the next few years, you'll really start to see the completion of the cycling network and the pedestrian network in a much greater way that Nanaimo hasn't seen before. And then finally, I'll just add that, as the Worship correctly identified, they are development-driven projects, but sort of staff now, when they look at a project, whether it's a sewer line replacement or a water main replacement, or even just asphalt rehabilitation, they're trying to coordinate their projects so where it makes sense you can save funds but also increase the ability of the road to accommodate cyclists or accommodate pedestrians.
Thank you. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. As someone who rides bikes now and has been for about a year, this city wasn't built for bikes at all. It was built for cars a long time ago and is built that way. In order to create the bike lanes that that we will need in the future, we're going to have to start making roads thinner or less lanes in them. If we wanted to put a bike lane down Bowen Road, which I would like to see, could make it easier for me to get downtown, we'd have to lose at least one lane on Bowen Road, which probably wouldn't go over well with many people out here. So we're going to have to make these decisions, and we're going to have to do some compromises. So right now, we have a system where we're sort of compromising the best we can do with what we have. And as staff and developers redo our road system, they're adding in the infrastructure that we need for bike lanes. One of the things that I've touched on in the past and was mentioned to me even during the election was the idea of not necessarily, and this isn't council policy, it's just an idea I had recently and a while ago, was that instead of requiring when we have a subdivision take place, generally the person who does the subdivision and when they do their amenities are required to put in sidewalks. Which is why you'll see around town a sidewalk here and then a big space, no sidewalk, and then another sidewalk. And that's in the event that later on when the city has the funding, they'll come in and build all the other sidewalks. One of the ideas is that instead of requiring a subdivision or a developer to put in a sidewalk there, maybe we would possibly ask them to fund a sidewalk somewhere else or a bike lane somewhere else. So these are some of the possible ideas that we as a council could look at. I haven't convinced enough people on council yet of this concept, but it's something we're looking at anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bonner. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. A few brief disparate comments. I think Councillor Brown and Bonner covered a lot. The first is a comment that the city wasn't built for bikes. I agree with you, but I still think people need to ride their bikes. And I think by people riding their bikes, that's going to be part of the culture change, where people see that this actually really is a bikeable city. We have two spines that go through the ENN and the Parkway that actually make cycling pretty decent in Nanaimo. Now, connectivity is a bit of an issue, granted, but I don't want people to use this city wasn't built for bikes as an excuse not to bike. Towards how we prioritize our projects, I think one of the things I've learned is that we prioritize our networks. So the Downtown Mobility Hub, Metro Drive, these are projects that are going to connect those networks. So we are essentially building a city that works for bikes. But it's incremental, it takes time. Hammond Bay, my understanding is that that would be a very, very difficult road to put bike lanes on. Because of the slopes, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it would be very, very expensive. So I am very frank with folks who live in that region that bike lanes on Hammond Bay Road are probably not going to happen soon. But to that point, I think this council is very amenable to changing the culture of transportation in Nanaimo. And I would encourage everyone, including those who live in the Hammond Bay region, to continue to ask us questions, to continue to advocate for bike lanes. Capital projects are prioritized based on certain criteria, and bike lanes and kind of those political pieces where we are pushing certain areas to get bike lanes, that's quite low on the list. So the more we hear from people, the better. And my last point, and Councillor Gesselbach kindly reminded me, is that we have budgeted, and I think we're in the hiring process for an active transportation coordinator. So again, that to me speaks to the culture of this council wanting to change how transportation is done in this city. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. And again, very quickly, others have spoken with much more knowledge on this subject than I can offer. But I think Councillor Bonner, Dr. Bonner, made the point, and I just want to stress it because I think people need to be aware that our city staff, when they are involved in planning and redoing of streets or areas or subdivisions, are very, very aware and concerned about improving our transportation options for citizens. So it's not just a case of replacing a roadway. It's now automatically a case that staff will look at how can we improve pedestrian access, improve access for cyclists, and all forms of transportation. So our staff are on top of that, and it doesn't all happen at once, but we're slowly making progress. And actually, I think our city is ahead of many others in the progress that we've made. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
My apologies, I didn't mean to hit that, actually. Sorry.
Very good. Reid, please.
That makes it easier. All right, I'll take another. Oh, we got one ready to go. So take another question from the audience here. I'll just remind everyone, especially to help the people at home who are watching the stream, to make sure that you're talking directly into the microphones so everyone can hear you. Thank you.
Hi. I'd like to ask the council if you have a service plan for cleaning up the downtown with a power washer. Do you realize how dirty the downtown is? Like, people urinate in front of the buildings, the library. When is the last time a power washer has ever hit the city streets of Nanaimo? Not for a long time. And cigarette butts everywhere. And particularly, I'd like you to pay attention to the community service building that houses the 710 Club. I asked them if they had a hose. They don't even have a hose. And their front steps have never been cleaned for years. And then you should see the back. It's disgusting. And I want you to really consider cleaning up the downtown if you want Nanaimo to be a hospital city. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I just acknowledge that downtown plays a quite prominent role in our strategic plan. I think Council is quite aware of its importance for both the economic driver that downtowns are, but also the wonderful places they can be to visit and how productive they can be socially. So we will be having a very specific discussions on downtown and how to improve our downtown, revitalize it where it needs revitalization, and really put steps in place where council can to help make it thrive.
Thank you. Mr. Sims.
Thank you, Worship. Just to inform residents and council that we power wash the downtown core twice per year. We have a street sweeper that's in the downtown core, that sidewalk street sweeper that sweeps twice per week, as well as our normal street sweeping on city streets, as well as garbage pickup at over 100 receptacles in the downtown core. So it's not that it's neglected, and I wouldn't want to leave anyone with that impression. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Martman.
Thank you for the question. And just when I was driving down, I actually have to agree with you. I think there are improvements we can make to our downtown, and I know that we're working on downtown revitalization with some of the buildings and how are we going to do this. But having a city, and this was just shared with us recently, having a city that's beautiful gives us pride. Having it clean, and all of us as citizens can help contribute to that, perhaps not throwing cigarette butts on the sidewalk. All of us need to do our part, but I can guarantee you one of the priorities of this city council is revitalizing our downtown and keeping it as clean as possible.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. As a former downtown business owner and a past president of the City Centre Association, we always encourage the businesses in all areas of the downtown to do their part to keep the sidewalks clean in front of their businesses. And I'm sad to say that not everybody listens. However, we were just, Councillor Gesselbach and myself were just going around to businesses yesterday afternoon, and one of the people that we were talking to said that, yes, they have to go out and clean up every morning, but the good news was they actually were doing it. And not everybody was, so I don't know whether there's a bylaw similar to snow removal as far as cleaning sidewalks, but maybe it's something we need to look at.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. Reid?
All right. This one comes in to us via Twitter. The strategic plan has livability as a priority. Research shows walkable cities are livable ones. The number one priority in our master transportation plan is pedestrians. When will council allocate proportional budget dollars to make Nanaimo truly walkable?
Thank you. I'm going to start off with a general response and then turn to Councillor Brown. I think it's fair to say that the answers that have been given to previous questions explain part of this. This is a rather large piece of geography that was expanded significantly in 1975. There weren't sewers and water lines to many parts of what is now the city of Nanaimo. There were poor roads or roads in very poor shape. And in addition, there certainly weren't any sidewalks anywhere. So in terms of proportion, I don't think we can answer the question proportionately. What percentage of the budget annually do we allocate to sidewalks per se? I suppose we might be able to come up with some kind of a figure, but I'm sure if we did that, the bicycle people would be saying, well, that's way too big and we want a much larger portion for bike lanes, and all those people commuting downtown in their vehicles, working and operating businesses who need to get there in time would be saying you've got to do more in the streets. So I offer that as a general comment, but I'm going to turn to Councillor Brown now.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I'm going to provide some commentary that might...
Under 5 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. On Tuesday night, Councillor Gesselbrock and I had a wonderful opportunity to meet Jeff Speck. And for those of you who don't know who he is, he's the author of Suburban Nation, Walkable City, and Walkable City Rules, 101 Steps to Improving Walkability in Your City. And he used a term there I'd never heard before, and it was called deep walkability. And in essence, what he was saying is it's really easy to focus on sidewalks, it's really easy to focus on cycle lanes, and say those are the key ingredients of walkability. And they are absolutely important, and having equitable space for all users is important. But what he was really, the nature of his talk and what he was getting at was that walkability ultimately isn't driven by sidewalks. You can have sidewalks that link places that are not walkable at all. There's a series of things that need to come into place for a walkable city, and I won't go into those. You can look it up if you're interested in yourself. But really it comes down to that the best transportation plan is a good land use plan. And those things take time. You know, it's making sure that you're developing complete neighborhoods, whether they are more urban in nature or whether they are sort of suburban in nature. They can be walkable. And we do have a zoning bylaw and an OCP that attempts to get at that, but we also now have an OCP review coming up, and I encourage folks that are really concerned about making those walkable neighborhoods to still advocate for sidewalks, still advocate for cycle lanes, but really get involved in the OCP process and have your voice heard to really express that idea around deep walkability and advocating for land use patterns that make walkable neighborhoods achievable.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be much briefer than Councillor Brown, but have much less of value to say, I'm sure. I just wanted to point out that walkability isn't restricted to sidewalks either. And I personally am very proud of our trail system that we have in Nanaimo, which we are continually working to add to and upgrade and improve. And I think a lot of people, when they're interested in getting out in the community and walking, would prefer to walk on a natural trailway as opposed to a concrete sidewalk. So I think that's an important aspect of walkability and livability in our city, and it's one that we definitely keep as a high priority and are always working to improve. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Just to quickly build on that, I think building a walkable city, getting deeper into the actual data and the research on it, it builds a more environmentally friendly city, it builds a much healthier city, and it actually builds a much more economically wealth city. And so if we can really focus on building neighborhoods that are comfortable to walk in, they're interesting to walk in, and also safe to walk in, we're going to see benefits across the board. So it's exciting to embark in this direction.
If I can just add, I hope that most of the people listening tonight will understand that in response to the significant expansion of the city, as I mentioned in 1975, one of the ways that previous councils started looking at this, and Mr. Lindsay's been here long enough to remember, to address that and make the city a walkable place, was to start to develop and try and concentrate developments around nodes throughout the city, whether it's the downtown core out on Bowen Road, near the Greenwalk Liquor Store and I forget the name of the plaza there, etc. Now quite a walkable area, lots of densification occurring in that area. So what walkability means is that people don't have to hop into an automobile to go and obtain all the services that they want. And that's a prime example of the city's response that is working well over time to make this a walkable community. No, Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'd like to enter into the debate. I go there quite a lot in that area. I live around Northfield area, and my house is walkable in that I can easily walk to the mall there, and there's a drugstore, there's a grocery store, there's a liquor store, and there's a pub, all the comforts of home. So I can easily get there, but behind me there's an alley, and none of the houses on the other side of the alley have access necessarily to that, or all of the other people on the other side. So everybody in the neighborhood behind me has to drive 4 blocks just to get to where it takes me a couple of minutes to walk to. The thing about also that down near Dufferin that you were referring to, I spent a lot of time down there as well. The interesting thing about there is I came out of a meeting one time and I needed to catch the bus to get home, and the bus was across the street. And I had to walk almost a kilometer to go down to a light, come across, and come all the way back to get to that bus stop because there's not enough crosswalks across Bowen. So we're working there, but we do have a long way to go. And those are some of the things that I know that we're aware of. I know that staff's aware of them as well. And these are some of the things that I would hope that we'll be looking at as we go through the years. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Reid.
All right, thank you for those questions and those answers. We have made it to the halfway mark, so everyone a pat on the back for getting this far. We've gone through quite a few questions, but of course we have quite a few more. So I'll just carry on. This next one comes in from Facebook, and the question is, I understand that a city or municipality must provide land for housing for those at risk of homelessness. Has this council been in recent discussions with the ministry about a permanent space for both of the current temporary locations? Thank you.
Let me start off by answering the premise of the question. There is no legal requirement per se that the city provide lands. It has certainly become a practice in British Columbia that municipal government, which is strictly a creation of statute for those who are listening, we don't exist as a matter of right like the provincial and federal governments that exist under our Constitution. City governments, the expectation has been that they will cooperate with the higher levels of government, most particularly the province, and provide land on different bases, sometimes long-term leases, sometimes outright transfer, or whatever the case may be, in order to enable, I'll call it public housing in the broad sense to be provided, whether that be seniors housing, supportive shelters, supportive housing, housing aimed at youth. We have examples of every type of housing across this community. And so we're not required to do so, but obviously as municipal governments face more and more downloading from senior levels of government, it becomes more and more common that that's the practice. Without disclosing details, because one thing is very clear, under the charter, etc., and the laws that govern us as a municipal government, we're not allowed to talk about land purchases and acquisitions and transfers publicly, because for obvious reasons it may have the effect of increasing the value or decreasing the value of certain properties, which would be, frankly, illegal. So that's probably as far as I'm prepared to go in that regard, except to say this, that the city and staff are working with other levels of government to try and ensure that the affordability crisis, which has impacted most harshly on those who were homeless already or at risk of being homeless, is something that the provincial government and we are addressing as council, and will continue to do so. We have just struck a task force, as many of you know. Councillors Hemmons and Bonner, yes, thank you, took me a second. Dr. Bonner to Councillor Thorpe. which will try and bring together, we hope in a successful way, all of those agencies of government, including BC Housing and the government, provincial government itself, to try and coordinate and ensure that housing projects can happen throughout the city, not in one specific neighborhood only or one area only, and address the issue. The homeless are not going to go away. They are, by and large, our fellow citizens. They are not newbies who arrived here a few months ago or a few weeks ago. It seems to be a popular myth and offers a wonderful excuse to ignore the issue. But the issue cannot be ignored. Its impact on the community, the increased cost to senior levels of government, which means they don't have funds to provide us for other purposes, is significant. Policing cost, healthcare cost, we're all very conscious of it. And we're conscious of the impact it has on the attitude of investors in our community. And we are anxious to address the problem. And finally, most importantly, because we are human beings and these are our fellow citizens and we care. If anyone wishes to add something, I'm more than happy to hear it, but that's probably as far as I can go in answering the technical side of that question. Over to you, Reid.
All right. I'd like to take another opportunity to have someone from the audience. Oh, there we have a volunteer. Yeah, so please step up to the podium, please.
Excellent, and congratulations for coming up to speak.
Thank you. I was looking for an indoor skate park in the Nanaimo area. There are none, and so I found a youth center in Courtenay, which is run by the city for youth. And I was wondering if Nanaimo, if that's on the strategic plan to have a youth center, indoor skate park for youth.
Councillor Hammonds.
Thank you. Not on the strategic plan, but a really neat idea. Something I think we would benefit from, but unfortunately not in the strategic plan or the budget.
Could be in the future, though.
I think it's fair to say that facilities for youth is an issue that was raised by some commentary around the strategic plan, specifically, that we weren't talking enough about youth. I see Mr. Harding coming forward. He may be able to offer some assistance, our Director of Parks and Recreation. Mr. Harding, please.
Thank you, Worship. Just want to make sure the council does have in this year's budget a new skateboard park, though to be built at the Harewood Centennial Park. So that skateboard park will be, we hope to be underway later this year, with opening early next year. With that, the new covered space at Harewood Centennial also offers opportunity for not permanent indoor skating, but some temporary indoor skating and other uses. So we've already got some other youth groups doing different activities in the covered space when the weather's not great or dark out. And so those opportunities are also available for the future. But the skateboard park, it's online and it's a good one to look at.
Thank you very much. Ask and it shall be given. Reid.
That was great. So this one is a question close to my heart. I didn't post it, by the way. And it comes into us from Twitter. Given priorities of environmental responsibility and livability, and that effective, convenient EV charging happens at home, what plans are there to provide support and/or incentives to install charging stations in pre-existing residential buildings and homes?
I see no councillors jumping forward, so I'm going to answer this in a general way at first. In my car tonight, not on my bicycle, I have to admit, I gather that sales of electric vehicles in British Columbia now account for 15%. The national average is 8%. So British Columbia is way ahead of the curve. Having said that, I believe Mr. Lindsay may correct me or advise or assist here. Some of the newer subdivisions and housing developments, in fact, include charging stations now for electric vehicles, and perhaps you could provide a little specific commentary on that before I turn to any other councillors for a further answer, please.
That's absolutely correct, Your Worship. The new parking bylaw, which was adopted, I guess it was probably a year and a half ago now, includes in it requirements for new developments to provide either electric vehicle as a percentage of the overall parking requirements, or at minimum electrical vehicle ready, so that the general wiring is in place so that a future resident, if they're wishing to include a charging station in their home, for example, can do that with relatively low cost.
Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I think the nature of the question was for existing houses. And I will say this, I think if you're looking to purchase an EV, I believe it's the provincial government funding stream right now provides $6,000 for hydrogen and $5,000 for an EV vehicle. So there's pretty significant rebate for the purchase of an EV. My understanding from talking to people in the industry is that the cost of an at-home charger, even above the 120 volts, is not that significant in compared to the overall cost of an EV. So I think as a city, it's an interesting proposition when we look at rebates and things like that, what we're trying to incentivize, and I'm sure we will have discussions like that in the future. But I think we also need to be looking for where we get the most bang for our buck, and if there's I think a business case or it makes sense where we do offer some rebates, I'm sure City Council will consider it.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. And again, I realize the question was related to private residences, but I need to comment. I think that thanks to the initiative of Councillor Geselbrecht, both the city and the regional district have decided to take advantage of a government incentive, provincial government incentive program to increase the number of electric charging stations within the city and within the regional district. So we are certainly moving ahead with that. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. I would be all in favor of some sort of incentives if they came up and we thought they would change the way people are working. We already provide a lot of incentives already for changing out toilets, wood stoves, that sort of thing. One of the problems that we noticed out of that conversation and those EV charging stations that are coming through grants was that a number of places in our city can't charge vehicles, and those are apartment buildings. And a lot of times strata buildings may not have enough electricity to set up a charging station. So those are some of the things that we as a city will have to look at in the future is providing those stations for areas where people who want to purchase cars can't, because electric cars can't, because they just have nowhere to charge them. So that's something I think we should be looking for in the future, of having charging stations in residential areas where there's a high density of people. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Geselbrecht.
Just really quickly add, I believe that the federal government has also added a $5,000 rebate on electric vehicles that, in addition to the provincial grants.
So I'm tempted to make some line about if you're looking for a new car, go see one of our car dealers who's selling electric vehicles, but I won't say that. Reid.
All right. I'm pretty happy with those answers too. All right, so this one comes into us, and the question is, from our website to city staff, can we get an update on the Gordon Street Hotel? Thank you.
Mr. Lindsay, they've asked for staff, and what the heck? It seems only fair you're here tonight, so let's take advantage of your presence.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, the hotel at 100 Gordon Street, which if people don't know is a 172-room, 9-story hotel that's been part of the idea behind this complex since it was envisioned many years ago. The building permit for that project was issued in February of this year, and at that time, the builders indicated that they're hoping to break ground this spring. Our most recent update from them is that they're hoping to be on site in June, and at that time we'll be holding a formal ribbon cutting with council.
I think it's noted under the good news category or the bad news category, depending on how you see this level of investment in our city. Last year, the city issued building permits totaling $218 million, I believe, Mr. Lindsay, and he'll nod his head sagely and agree. And this year, as of the end of April, we had already issued $200 million in building permits. Now, we're not expecting to issue 600 this year, but it does indicate a significant interest in construction in Nanaimo. And from my own observation, one of the bits of good news with all of this construction is that you're starting to see some for rent signs in the larger apartment buildings, which is good news for people who've had a very difficult time trying to find housing in our community. No further comments? Reid.
All right, that was a good one. So I'm going to go to the audience again. Oh, we have a volunteer right there. If you'd like to step up to the podium to ask your question, please. Thank you.
Hello.
Good evening.
I'm sure that the council is aware that the DND is going to be increasing their gun practice. Unfortunately, I live off of Nanaimo Lakes Road, and it does affect me. I know that all the talk is about the trails being closed, and everybody's upset about that, but it's more than just the trails. When the military purchased that in 1920, there was no residential area. That was in the middle of nowhere, pretty much. And Nanaimo has grown, and I've been listening to, you know, making it bike safe and walkable, and now military wants to increase the gun practice. I'm a shift worker, and they do approximately, this is just one individual, they do 150 rounds when they are practicing, and it's like fireworks. So it's, and where I'm living, the residents are not even aware that the military will be increasing their gun practice. I know that there's petitions going around. I'm not too sure if the council is going to have any say or what have you. I don't know where to go at this point. I have written letters and I've sent them all off to the Ministry of Defense. When it first started, I was under the impression, because I was told that the reason they're increasing at the moment is because Chilliwack's base was under renovations. And once it was completed, then they would be going back to Chilliwack. But I don't know. I understand now that that is not the case, and I'd like to know, is council aware? And if so, what, or is there anything that can be done?
I think it's safe to say that we received the information about the proposed changes and the takedown of some of the infrastructure for biking in the area and the commentary around increased use of the firing range at the same time everybody else did. I don't believe council or staff received any prior confirmation that this was going to occur, correct, Mr. Harding? Now, if the mayor is wrong, you're more than welcome to correct him in public here.
Thank you, Worship. We did, DND did reach out to us to clarify some of the signage that was on site over the last year. So we've been working with them to clarify some signage issues and of which are city signs or not city signs on the Westwood Lake Trail system, which isn't in part of this. The part of increased use, I'm not aware of that. That doesn't mean they haven't done other information updates to others. I'm not aware of that.
Okay. What I can tell you is that these are DND lands. They're in Department of National Defense, federal government. We don't have jurisdiction or control. Certainly, I can tell you that we have received, as members of council, a significant volume of correspondence, particularly via email, of many people expressing concern, not around the particular issue you are in terms of noise, perhaps they're not conscious or worried about that, but certainly in terms of the recreational use in the area. Whether the political pressure that flows from this will make the federal government or the DND responsive is another question. I know that our new Member of Parliament, Paul Manley, is certainly aware of it and intends to take it up with the Minister of National Defence. But that's probably as much as I can usefully tell you at this point, subject to what Councillor Hemmons is going to say.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that forward. I think so much of what we're hearing around this issue right now is about the trails. And it can be easy to forget that it's not just the recreational users that are going to be impacted by this. When the range was established, Nanaimo's population was 6,300 people. we're now close to 100,000 people. So I think, for me, that poses an interesting question of, is this the right place for an active range? Now, as Mayor Krogh says, this is a jurisdictional issue. This is federal land. We really don't have a say. And this council has not yet had an opportunity to have a really full conversation about what we want to do, if we want to do anything. But I anticipate that we will have that conversation. I would strongly encourage you to call, write, email Paul Manley as your federal representative. I had a conversation with him last weekend where I lamented in ways that he's a singular representative, and so when this broke, he immediately wrote the minister, which I think was appropriate. But as a council of 9, we have a bit more process that we have to go through, and we just haven't gotten there yet. So I, for one, as a recreational user of that area, feel very strongly that if there is risk of someone being hurt, then we should be looking at the risk. We should be looking at encroaching urbanism rather than shutting down I think we just need to tread very lightly, and I anticipate we'll be having that conversation soon, and I just thank you for reminding us that it's not just about the recreational users. Thank you.
And to refer again to what Mr. Harding said, certainly we're in communication with the ND in hopes of getting clarification, and I'm sure given the public reaction, including a front page story in the Times Colonist last weekend, that there will be some political interest in Ottawa around this particular issue. Reid.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, so this one comes in from our website and is directed towards Mayor and Council. To date, Council has allocated significant funds to new initiatives, but I don't believe any major cost savings have been found. When will Council direct its CAO to find real savings from every city department? Thank you.
I'm going to respond in a general way first, and this may come as a surprise to many who are listening tonight. We are short a number of senior positions and managers in this city. It is a significant decrease, notwithstanding population increase over the last few years, and that creates problems for operating the city efficiently. I appreciate the suggestion that there are somehow monies to be found, as is the standard political cry of everyone who's not in office or in government, that we just have to cut a little bit here and a little bit there and the money will magically be found. I'm perfectly prepared tonight to take it on the chin from the questioner and say that in terms of management, certainly, we are running a ship that is far too lean, and that creates problems for the management and operation of this city. In terms of cuts to departments, if staff was anxious to keep its jobs and could relate where they could find cuts, we would and have already heard about them. We have shifted our priorities to some extent within the constraints of existing budgets, because I can tell you, based on my 18 years of experience in the legislature, as well as just operating a business, if you aren't increasing your revenue and you have some committed expenditures that have to be met annually, services that have to be delivered, roads that have to be plowed, et cetera, to make any significant and dramatic cuts means a cut in service. And everybody's always happy when it's somebody else's service that's being cut. So I appreciate the philosophical consideration behind the question, but annually our staff look at ways of saving money and make proposals, and it is up to council to implement them. But to imply that somehow there are departments in this city that are operating with excess funds is simply not accurate or fair. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I just wanted to add something because I didn't want you to stand alone in that opinion, because I totally agree with what you've just stated. As somebody who has been at this table for several years now, it's my observation that our staff is operating in a very lean way, too lean in my opinion, and we are constantly looking for ways to save money and run an efficient operation. I don't think there is waste, or very little waste at all, in the way we do things. And certainly it's an ongoing mandate of staff to look for ways to economize, to run a tighter ship if we can. But I think the mayor is quite right that we are, quite frankly, understaffed in some departments, and there is no fat to be trimmed, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. One of the other points that should be brought up, I think, at this point in time about saving money, and that is this building that we're in, the Port of Nanaimo Centre. This past year, actually, with all revenue and all expenses against each other, actually recorded a very minimal profit as opposed to us having to subsidize it. So I think the figure is around $240,000, which I know isn't a lot, but it's going in the right direction, and with the hotel coming on site in a couple of years, I can only see good things for this facility. Thank you.
Thank you. Reid.
Turn on the mic. All right, we're going to take another question from our studio audience here. Please step up to Mike and talk directly in. Thank you.
Good evening.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for holding this. I very much appreciate it, and I think it's great for our city to, get this early look at what's happening. A discussion that you guys were having just a little while ago about electric vehicles and stuff. If I could just ask, perhaps, if you're looking at doing some subsidies or rebates, how about on the e-bikes? Because some of us need a little bit of help getting around on some of the hills. So I just was wondering if you'd consider that.
Thank you very much. An interesting proposition. Councillor Bonner.
I'd have to step out as a conflict because I'm looking to buy an e-bike so I can keep up to those younger kids. So I couldn't vote on it, I'm afraid.
Councillor Brown.
If I may, yes, thank you, Your Worship. I think it's an interesting proposition. I think it takes careful consideration, though, because I think there's a question of equity that needs to also be looked at. And e-bikes, while I think are wonderful for pushing forward alternative mobilities and getting people on bicycles that might not normally, they vary in price significantly. And so I think you really have to sort of take a step back and look at really what is the behavior that you're trying to drive, and does the rebate help achieve that? I'm not sure. I think it's something worth exploring personally, but I think it takes some very careful consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. So this one is a question for everyone, I guess. Can you please provide an update on the daytime drop-in center for homeless and marginalized people? Thank you.
Councillor Bonner, Councillor Hemmons. What is it, when it's a tough thing and it's bad news, you give it to staff. When it's good news and credit, you give it to the politicians? No. Mr. Lindsay.
Your Worship, I can start off just by reminding everyone that there's been in the budget for at least the last 2 years, and Council kept it in the budget this year, $100,000 to support a resource center, such as being questioned here this evening. At the time that the money was put in the budget, though, it was very clear that the cost of operating such a center efficiently and effectively would cost much more than $100,000. And it really required our partners at the provincial government to work with us if we're going to deliver such a service. So those discussions have been ongoing. That money remains in the budget. And I would also add that Council just recently created your task force on health and housing. And I think items like that, which are cross-jurisdictional, will probably be items that are discussed, in my mind, at the task force.
An excellent answer. Any councillors? Councillor Bonner.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. To further that, as part of our strategic planning regarding homelessness, last council passed the homelessness plan for 2023. And in that plan it refers to the day center and how it should be set up and run. And I can probably assure everyone here that both myself and Councillor Emmons will be looking at that as part of our work that we do on the task force.
Councillor Thorpe, and I've hit it too fast, so you're going to have to turn yourself on.
I'll do that. Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, and I appreciate that question because I think that's a really interesting concept that I am sure the task force will examine and address. And I just wanted to add supplemental to that, and Mr. Lindsay can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the city is still funding the shower program at Caledonia Park, run in conjunction with the Unitarian shelter in the Brecon neighborhood. So I think that's a worthwhile project which has proven itself and is continuing. Thank you.
Thank you. Reid.
All right, thanks for that. So we'll go to the studio audience another time. Is there anyone who has any questions? We've only got about half an hour left, so I want to cover anyone who made the trip out.
This is no time to be shy.
Bueller. Okay, we got one.
As they say in the game show, come on down. Good evening, and thanks for coming out.
Hello, Mayor and Council. So the City of Victoria recently started to look into removing fares for their public transit as a measure against climate change. Now, since you guys have declared a climate emergency, are you going to be following their test case and their further ideas that they're presenting?
I can respond to that in a general way, and then I'll look to other councillors to respond. Transit in this area is a regional district authority. The money comes through BC Transit. The city does not directly manage or control transit. We obviously play a role, 8 of the 9 of us as directors of the regional district of Nanaimo. I think it's a very interesting proposition, but I think the more appropriate thing to do than to tout it as a possibility would be for BC Transit, and with the support of the provincial government, in a given community that was relatively isolated, and Victoria is not, and neither are we arguably, to demonstrate it as a pilot project and see if you would actually significantly decrease the numbers of vehicles on the road, and whether the public would in fact change their habits in a significant way. I think it's a lovely concept, and I'm not being dismissive, but I don't sense any appetite for council here because, as I say, of the jurisdictional issue, but other councillors may take a different view. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate the question, and the Mayor is quite right. Transit is a regional district function, which 8 of this council do sit on the regional district, as you might be aware, so we certainly have a number of votes there. In fact, there was a Transit Select Committee meeting earlier today, which many of these councillors were involved in. As for the Victoria suggestion, to this point, my understanding it is just a suggestion. They have not decided to implement that.
I believe they are doing a pilot project for people under the age of 19, I think, which is starting next year.
I'm sorry, then I misunderstood your statement. I thought you were referring to free transit for everyone.
Well, they're starting with free transit for people under 19, and I think they believe they're looking at that and then moving forward.
I see. I'm sorry, I misunderstood what you said. So what I wanted to say is that the regional district is certainly looking at increasing availability of transit. At our meeting today, there was agreement to recommend adding service on 3 statutory holidays that are currently not covered in this area. Councillor Brown has put forward a suggestion that we request, was it 20,000 hours from BC Transit, where normally we would get about 5,000 hours each year. So we want to significantly offer what we can deliver for transit, whether it's viable or feasible to offer free transit to a large segment of the population. That would have to be carefully studied, and there would be a huge cost implication. Would it be worthwhile? I don't know at this point. It's something that eventually we might explore.
Is it something that you're going to look at in the lens of both climate change and possibly social justice as a method of people who, this is a city that is not, has a below average income for both British Columbia and Canada, and with factors of both housing becoming more expensive, the ability for people to access transit is important. So as a social justice thing too, with this council, as having 8 seats on RDN, look at that as an approach.
Certainly.
Appreciate the argument. I'll let Councillor Thorpe finish, but then I've got 3 other councillors who'd like to respond to you.
Okay, in that case, I'll defer to other councillors. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
Yes, I think it's a great question. I just want to address actually the social justice issue first. Providing universal transit to everyone doesn't, while it does capture those that might need to take transit and have no other option, it might actually undermine the entire system. And so I think there is a careful calculation there. And if you're doing income testing, then that's a different conversation. With respect to around environmental reasons, I think this council passed a motion to consider 20,000 additional hours. In the meantime, that has to go through a process, and in the meantime, we'll see in 2019 additional 5,900. Some of those will be eaten up by the initiative Councillor Thorpe just sort of mentioned. If the 3 statutory holidays, there will be an additional 2,500 and another 5,000 in our term. So that equates to about 4 buses, not a huge significant amount. But with respect to transit, I think in order for it to be a viable option for those, and I think we need to park this issue of social justice, well, I think it's an important one, really around the environmental initiatives. You're trying to get as many people on it. So a lot of things need to come together, and part of those is your stops need to be a place where you don't need a car. And whether that's walking, whether that's cycling, but I think it's more of that land use issue of getting people together. So I think it's easy to just look at it as a function of hours, or getting more buses on the road. But I think it's an oversimplification, and a lot of parts need to come together to work well to make transit a viable option. And also, you really need to make it an economically viable system so it doesn't essentially run itself into the ground.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. When the number 40, when I'm on it, there's a lot of students that get on that, mostly going to the university, but also go to the NDSS. And I'd be very much in favor of giving free bus passes to students with student cards. And here's one of the reasons. If you want to go to high school on a bus, because it's too far to walk, you have to spend $40 a month. If you want to get in your car and drive there and park, it's free. So there's a dichotomy. It doesn't kind of make sense. So that's, if we're trying to change people's behavior, that may be one of the ways of doing it. Thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Just want to say I appreciate the question. Just recently heard the stat that 60 to 75% of Nanaimo's emissions are from transportation, and I think taking a good look at what we can do to in our transportation and all systems to lower that emissions is important. So thank you.
Great.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Great questions. Thank you. So this one comes in on our website again. Just a reminder, we do have a few more minutes. Probably won't get to all the questions, but if you do have questions online, you can use our Twitter hashtag NanaimoTH, on Facebook, cnan.ca/FBTownHall, and also on our website, cnan.ca/webtownhall, to submit your questions. And like I mentioned earlier, if the questions aren't addressed here, they will be circulated afterwards. We'll be doing our best to answer them and get those out on our website within the next few weeks. So this one, again, comes in from our website, and this one is to Mayor and Council. There appears to be nothing in the strategic plan related to the beautification of Nanaimo, much needed if we are to attract tourists and cruise ships. We watched the city of Langford transform their city in a very short period of time, resulting in tremendous economic growth. Is there anything in the strategic plan that we may use as a lesson from them?
I will respond in a general way. This community some years ago was referred to as a series of malls in search of a city. And I won't say anything critical about the city of Langford, but let me just say, as the proud mayor of Nanaimo, I will take Nanaimo over Langford any day. So I disagree with the premise of the question. Having said that, in terms of beautification, the first question we had tonight was around the waterfront walkway. Is it in the strategic plan specifically as an action item? I'm not sure. Is it something we're proceeding with? Yes. Our park system, Mr. Harding, I think, is a very proud individual. He presides over a wonderful park system, trail system in the city. We have much to be proud of in terms of beautification. Certainly, we're all looking at Number 1 Port Drive and the kind of development that will occur in our downtown along the waterfront generally, in conjunction with and with the support of the Port of Nanaimo, who quite rightly should take credit for significant improvements to our waterfront over the years, including Sutton Maffeo Park and other improvements. So there's a lot to be said for it. In terms of other specifics, I see we have already got a couple more councillors to say a few things, and let's go to Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, in the strategic plan, I think it's under the economic health is the revitalization of downtown Nanaimo, which is a key as far as I'm concerned. But on another note, recently my cousin and her husband from Waterloo, Ontario, and he's a former director of Parks and Rec in Waterloo, were here to visit. And so I took them down to Swilana and a few other places. And he had no idea that we had all this here. And he has been here before. So, you know, sometimes I think Nanaimo has its own best kept secrets that we need to take time to actually show off to some of our visitors. And so, yeah, no, we got more here than we thought we did.
Thank you very much, Councillor Turley. Councillor Martman.
Thank you. And to concur with the other councillors, our city is a beautiful city. One of the reasons when I first moved back to the island and chose Nanaimo was, and I happen to live in Harewood, is from 5 minutes I can go to a lake, I can go to a river, I can go to the ocean. I have my choice of our environment is absolutely outstanding here in Nanaimo, and I've lived in many cities in the world. Very few cities are port cities. I think if we can revitalize our downtown, we continue with our waterfront walkway, and often I think we have a beautiful city. We could just maybe be a little bit cleaner and clean up some derelict buildings, but it's already beautiful.
Thank you.
All right, we're in the home stretch. I'm going to go one more time to our studio audience, see if there's anyone else who has a lingering question. If not, I've got one ready here. Okay, so this one's a pretty simple one. Comes in from Twitter. When will the foot ferry be in operation?
I was going to say the question is certainly simple. The answer is incredibly complex. I can safely say that City Council and the provincial government and the federal government have all been working with the proponents. The only one on the table, Island Ferry Services. There is a general agreement in this community that it is probably the most important link in that old analogy about the chain. We don't have a chain, so to speak, unless we get that as the link, and I play on the word. Many investors and people who wish to locate businesses and create businesses here because of the high cost of real estate and accommodation, et cetera, in the Lower Mainland are looking to Nanaimo, and one of the first questions they ask is, when will the fast ferry, the foot passenger ferry, be up and running? I can't give a when. That is a question, in fairness, directed more appropriately to Island Ferries, but I want to assure the person who's asked the question that there is strong enthusiasm. It is a priority for Council. It was the subject of discussions today with one of the major other, I'll call him an entity without disclosing, in our community, and it's very important to us. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have been meeting with one of the proponents over the last couple of weeks. They ran into a bit of a roadblock, which is not I'll put it that it can be resolved, but it's going to take some push from the residents of our community to let the provincial government know that, yes, indeed, we do want this fast ferry, and to start sending letters to Minister
Transportation,
Transportation,
Minister
yes.
Trevena, and to the Premier.
Yeah. So anybody listening, please, if you are in favor of having this link to the mainland, please write to the minister ASAP, because everything's in order except for that one piece of financing, so.
Thanks very much. Reid.
All right, good answers for the short but complex question. So this one comes in from our website and is directed towards Mayor and Council. What are your plans to ensure equal access and inclusion for all citizens of Nanaimo, but specifically for persons with disabilities, given that it is common knowledge among advocates that there are serious gaps in equal citizenship, access, and inclusion?
I'm going to start with a general answer, and then I'll turn to staff around specifics perhaps, but certainly it's around design and requirements for new construction, dealing with existing, particularly sidewalks, access to public buildings, all of those things. It's an important issue, and I think it's fair to say that it's on the agenda, but I'll defer to Councillor Gesselbrock, who's anxious to say something.
Just to build on that, as people know, that council has been in discussion at our Governance and Priorities Committee around committee structures, and we're putting different ideas of roundtables and task force together. And one excellent idea that was put forth by Councillor Brown was a committee called the Intersectional Urbanism Committee, which we think also sums up the Inclusive Cities Committee, which would be made up of different stakeholders across the spectrum of the spectrum of the different citizens and colors and all shapes and sizes of our community that could provide input on different aspects of development and city plans. So it's something that council is discussing. There's a lot of different considerations to be made around that, but it is something that I think that I would believe that would really help out, provide the perspectives that may not always be at the table when decisions are made.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I just thought that our council priority under livability describes we proactively plan for Nanaimo's growth and focus on community infrastructure to support an inclusive, healthy, and desirable place to live. And our focus is to make this a desirable city for all walks of life, all generations, for everyone. So this is a priority for this council.
Thank you. Reid.
All right, those were great. So this one comes in from our website and is directed towards Mayor and Council. What is being planned in terms of a recycling facility as we once had?
No, Councillor Thorpe.
I'll jump in before Councillor Gesselbrock takes over. I don't want to be blunt, but the short answer at this point is nothing is being planned. And I don't mean that in a harsh way or a negative way, but the reality is that the former Nanaimo Recycling Exchange operation was a private operation, albeit not for profit, and it obviously had a lot of support in the community. And I was personally sorry to see it have to close its doors. But it was not a city function. Recycling is a function of the regional district, and they try to do the best they can, and I think we do a very good job, actually. But as far as the city planning to replace the Nanaimo Recycling Exchange, there are no plans at this point. It would mean building a building, staffing it with union staff, of course, and the last estimate we had on approaching something like that was getting close to $10 million. So on that note, I'll turn it over to Councillor Gesselbrock, I believe.
Thank you.
You need to put your, sorry.
Well, no, I've got it right.
We're good? We're good. The regional district has set a 90% diversion target of waste from landfill, which is a very ambitious target, and there's a lot of plans in place with the new solid waste management plan at the regional district level to reach that goal. In addition, with the city of Nanaimo, we're recently in the process of hiring a recycling, I'm not sure the exact name of the position, a recycling and policy advisor. And I think at this stage of the game, you know, all of council is very committed to evidence-based decision-making. And so I think one of the first priorities is, as we get into this term, is to really look at what are the gaps in our recycling system, look at the different composition of our waste, and develop a targeted approach of how to best support the regional district in meeting that. And so I do lament the passing of the Nanaimo Recycling Exchange in the form that it was. I know that the organization is still present and working on plans of how they would like to proceed. And today I was cleaning out my garage and shed, and I had a huge mountain of broken plastic containers, and that type of hard plastic isn't taken anywhere. And it is a real shame, and I feel really guilty about having to bring that stuff to the landfill. So there is definitely gaps, and I think people are pretty committed to figuring out what's the best way forward.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think this is a conversation I think our entire community needs to have. And in that we don't recycle all the things that many other municipalities around North America do. And there are many reasons for that. And most of it is the fact that we live on an island and it costs too much to ship it to the mainland. So, or there's not someone to be able to buy the product. So I think we need to have a conversation of how much do we want to recycle and how much do we want to pay? Because the closer we get to 90%, the more we have to pay. And I don't have a problem with paying it as long as everyone else agrees as well. Do we want to go down the road where the city does its own recycling and takes care of that, as mentioned before, and it's a $10 million plus proposal? And so, is that something that we want to do? And I would like to see that conversation take place so that we can have that answer is how much do we want to recycle and how much do we want to pay to do that? Okay.
Thank you very much. Reid.
All right, I'll give one last chance to our studio audience if there's any other questions. No? No? Okay. So this one comes in from our website, and actually Councillor Armstrong is not here, but it is about her. This is for Mayor and Council. I'm aware that Cheryl Armstrong uses Facebook to report to citizens about what is happening in the city from a councillor's point of view. Are there others? Do any of our 8 city council or city RDN board members report on happenings at the RDN? Thank you.
That's a very good question. I'm sure all of those who use Facebook might want to step forward and comment. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I don't use Facebook as much anymore. I found it very challenging to sometimes have conversations on social media because the intent of your message can be so easily misinterpreted. So I feel really strongly that if anybody, any citizen wants to reach out to myself, or I'm sure any councillor, we have a direct phone number. We have a direct email. You can email mayor and council, which is great because one of us will respond instead of all 8 of us. But if you want to reach out to us as individuals, I really would prefer having a coffee with you or meeting or talking on the phone, because I just find social media and fake news just very disturbing.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. I do comment on Facebook, not as much as I used to, kind of miss it actually. My role has changed since when I was before. But I do, once in a while, will post something on my website, www.bonner.ca. You all won't go through about some of the things that are happening. I'm going to be posting something shortly. But I I'm kind of the person that would like to see more conversations having in social media. I know some of us aren't on it because we don't know where it is, but
I accept that criticism.
I think there possibly could be a way that we have this more open conversation, and it's not just Facebook, it's public engagement in general. And I think, I know that the City Council is looking, and staff is looking at that aspect of getting more conversations starting with the public and doing that online, which I think a lot of people are quite interested in. Thank you.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. I'm going to reiterate what Councillor Martman said, and that's this council is really open to engagement, and I can't imagine one of us that wouldn't pick up our phone if it rung, or we wouldn't respond to a personal email. Facebook is one method that you can get a hold of us, but many of us are open and available via different methods. I really applaud Councillor Armstrong's commitment to reporting out on major decisions, etc. It takes a long time and a lot of effort to do that, and then there's follow-up dialogue that happens, and for me personally, I don't feel like it's the appropriate place for me to have that dialogue, and I've found ways around that, but I think it's very personal how we engage with residents. And this council, I'm sure I can speak for everyone, we are completely open to hearing from residents and meeting with residents. I can't tell you how many cups of coffee I've had since I've become a councillor. We're reachable, and Facebook isn't the only way to get a hold of us.
Sorry, I hit it too quickly, but I've jumped to Brown, and I think I skipped somebody, but it was Councillor Thorpe, of course. Who else?
Of course. You don't like to look to your right, do you? I just wanted to agree with the points that Councillor Hemmons made, and I'm not active on Facebook, but I'm interested in social media from listening to my fellow councillors. I'm thinking of buying a fax machine, so. But no, seriously, when I heard the question, I took it from a slightly different angle, because beyond the general question regarding interaction with council, I heard RDN mentioned there. And the question to me was, do we comment on RDN issues? I would just point out that I'm quite pleased to announce that the Regional District of Nanaimo is starting to live stream their meetings, and people can access those meetings as they can Nanaimo City Council meetings. So we're working at the Regional District to improve our accessibility as well. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you. Like Councillor Hemmons, I applaud Councillor Armstrong's Facebook posts. Even when I was not on council, I did read hers. So I think it's a wonderful initiative. I'm more of a stream of consciousness guy, so you can find me on Twitter. But no, I think it's a great question. But I think every councillor has their particular favor, and as has been highlighted, there's many opportunities to dialogue with councillors through different different forums, and the fax machine, I hope is not one, but yeah. So I think it's, we do need to make more of an effort, but it's extremely, it's a time sink that, I think Councillor Armstrong's very tactical about it. She provides a monthly update or a bi-weekly update, and I think that's a wise approach. It seems to be working for her, and, something that I can learn from.
Thank you. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. So I would just like to say that I've never used Twitter and barely Facebook, but then I go back to the time when we used to get telegraphs delivered by a fellow on a bicycle, so it seems like we've gone full circle. Anyway, seriously.
I'll bring you a note on my bicycle.
Seriously, we've had the good fortune of being able to hire a manager of communications, and one of her first jobs was to ask us for our kind of thoughts on our first 6 months, and of course I jumped right all over that, and I don't know how long it was, but she pared it down to like 6 words, which almost said the same thing. So I think if we can maybe consider doing that on a more regular basis, and post it on the website, it might also bring some wealth of knowledge to the electorate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm conscious of the time, and I don't, unless it's a very simple question, I don't think we're going to have a chance to respond before 9. And
Probably not substantively, no.
No. Having it's turned 8:59. I want to thank everyone who took the time to come out tonight in person. I want to thank all of the citizens who took time to send questions in through the various methods, including that hashtaggy thing that everyone's acquainted me with. I will not be participating in social media, and I'm sorry, and I realize that will disappoint people, but it's not my style, and I think in my years in politics that my style is clearly one where I'm quite approachable. As we conclude tonight, though, I want to give you a short quote from an email I received from Will McMartin, who's a fairly well-known political commentator, who said this to me the other day. He said, "Sheesh, Nanaimo Council appears professional, businesslike, uncontroversial. What's the fun in that?" So I just want to say to Council that I think we've certainly turned a corner. I want to thank all the staff who helped put this together tonight, particularly Reed, who's acted as MC. Again, thank everyone for being out, and the kind of questions that we've received tonight indicate that the people of Nanaimo take a keen interest in their civic government and a responsible interest, and I think we're all very proud to be your representatives on council. So with that, everyone, thank you and good night. Motion to adjourn.